Arabia just told Iran to stop, or else. This was a direct on-camera threat from the Saudi foreign minister standing in front of the world's press, with missile interceptors firing outside the building behind him. Let that image sink in. Foreign ministers from a dozen countries are sitting inside a conference room in Riyadh. And while they are literally inside that meeting, Iran fires 4 ballistic missiles at the city. Saudi air defense lights them up in the sky. And then the Saudi FM walks out to the microphone and says, "Our patience is not unlimited." That is not diplomacy anymore. That is a countdown. Here is exactly what Prince Faisal bin Farhan said, and pay attention to the specific words because they matter. The kingdom, but also its partners who have been attacked and beyond, has very significant capacities and capabilities that they could bring to bear should they choose to do so. He was asked directly, how long does Iran have before Saudi Arabia acts? His answer was brutal in its honesty. Do they have a day? 2? A week? I am not going to telegraph that. He also said, I am doubtful they have that wisdom. That is a man who has already made up his mind. That press conference was not a warning. It was a formality before something happens. And it gets worse for Iran when you zoom out and look at who else was in that room. Qatar, UAE, Turkey, Jordan, Egypt, Kuwait, Bahrain, Lebanon, Pakistan, Syria, Azerbaijan, 12 countries. Countries that, up until recently, were broadly sympathetic to Iran. Countries that had spent years trying to build bridges with Tehran. And every single one of them just signed a joint statement asserting their right to defend themselves under Article 51 of the UN Charter. Article 51 is the international legal basis for military action. They did not say they want peace. They did not call for a ceasefire. They invoked the legal right to go to war. People keep comparing this to the tensions we have seen before. 2019, when Houthi drones hit Saudi Aramco facilities. 2020, after the Soleimani killing. The years of proxy fighting in Yemen. This is not that. Every single one of those incidents involved Iran operating through deniability, proxies, cutouts, plausible distance from the actual attack. Iran could always say, we did not do that. Those are independent actors. We cannot be held responsible. That cover is completely gone now. Iran's Revolutionary Guards put out a statement calling their attacks on Gulf energy infrastructure Operation True Promise 4 and dedicated it to their killed intelligence minister. They took credit, publicly, officially. With a name and a dedication, there is no deniability left. Iran directly struck Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. It destroyed infrastructure. It fired ballistic missiles at Riyadh while a diplomatic summit was happening. It is not hiding anymore. And that changes the entire calculation for the Gulf states. Because before, retaliating against Iran meant retaliating against a ghost. Hitting a proxy force in Yemen, or Iraq, or Lebanon, you could never directly hold Iran accountable because they were always operating one step removed. Now Iran handed them the justification on a plate. Signed, stamped, and named after a dead intelligence chief. The other thing people are underreporting is what the Saudi FM said about the 2023 normalization deal. 3 years ago, Saudi Arabia and Iran shook hands in Beijing. It was one of the biggest diplomatic moments of the decade. 2 regional rivals, backed by China as mediator, agreeing to restore diplomatic ties and calm tensions. It was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter. The Saudi FM buried it in a single sentence. What little trust there was has been completely shattered. Then he said, we were not in any way convinced that Iran can be a legitimate partner when it behaves this way.
What little trust there was before has completely been shattered. Has been shattered on multiple levels.
That normalization deal is dead. Not strained, not paused. Dead. And the Saudis said it publicly, deliberately, for the whole world to hear. Al Jazeera's correspondent in Tehran framed it perfectly. He said this could be read as the end of the beginning of Iranian-Saudi normalization. 3 years of diplomatic work, erased in 3 weeks of war. Here is where it gets complicated. Because Iran is not stupid. They know exactly what they are doing. Their public argument is that Gulf countries allowed the U.S. to use their airspace and territory to conduct strikes on Iran. Therefore, in Iran's view, those countries are legitimate military targets. They are trying to force the Gulf states to pressure Washington into a ceasefire by making the cost of hosting American forces unbearable. It is actually a coherent strategy on paper. The problem is, the execution has been catastrophic, because instead of scaring the Gulf states into neutrality, Iran has done the opposite. It has united them. It has pushed countries that wanted nothing to do with this war directly toward the edge of entering it. Qatar's Ras Laffan facility is burning. Abu Dhabi's Habshan gas plant was shut down. Saudi refineries were targeted. These are not symbolic strikes. These are attacks on the economic foundations of entire nations. You do not bomb someone's economy and then expect them to negotiate on your behalf. And the leadership situation inside Iran makes this even more unpredictable. Mojtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader, has never held government office in his life. He has not been seen publicly since he was appointed after his father was killed. His official Telegram channel is posting revenge quotes. Nobody knows who is actually making operational decisions inside the IRGC right now. The men who would normally be managing this escalation are dead. The Saudi FM even acknowledged this directly. He expressed doubt that Iran has the wisdom to recalculate. Not the capability, the wisdom. That is a very specific word to choose. Let me give you the stakes in pure numbers because the abstract talk of escalation needs a concrete anchor. Qatar supplies a massive portion of Europe's LNG. The Ras Laffan facility that was struck handles an enormous share of that supply. Abu Dhabi's Habshan plant, now shut down, is one of the largest gas processing facilities in the Gulf. Saudi Arabia has been intercepting hundreds of missiles and drones since this war began. But Wednesday was the first time Riyadh residents received emergency phone alerts. The first time. People in the Saudi capital heard explosion sounds, received government warnings on their phones, and watched interceptors light up the night sky above their city. That is a psychological threshold that has now been crossed. The war is no longer abstract for ordinary Saudis. It is outside their windows. And the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. 20% of global oil and gas supply locked down. Oil sitting near $110 a barrel. Diesel in the US crossing $5. European governments scrambling. Asian manufacturers watching input costs spiral. Every day the strait stays closed is another day of economic damage that compounds. And right now, there is no mechanism to reopen it because the country that controls access to it is in the middle of a leadership vacuum while being bombed. 12 countries just met in Riyadh and collectively asserted the right to military action. Saudi Arabia reserved the right to strike Iran directly. The legal framework has been invoked. The diplomatic off-ramp has been publicly declared closed. Iran's new leadership is issuing revenge statements on Telegram and conducting operations named after martyred officials. The US has a president posting about finishing off the Iranian terror state on Truth Social, while simultaneously scrambling to manage fuel prices at home. And none of the people who would normally be working the phones to prevent this from spiraling are in their positions anymore. Larihani is dead. Khatib is dead. The institutional memory of the Iranian negotiating apparatus has been physically eliminated. The Saudi FM said he hopes Iran recalculates quickly. Then he said he doubts they will. When the foreign minister of the country most likely to enter this war tells you he does not think the other side is wise enough to back down, that is not pessimism. That is intelligence assessment delivered in plain language. We are watching the Gulf states move from bystanders to belligerents in real time. The only question left is what the trigger looks like. And based on what was said in Riyadh last night, it does not need to be much bigger than what already happened. Iran fired missiles at a diplomatic summit while it was happening. If that did not cross the line, what does?